This video is part 2 to my Young Christian Wives talk that I filmed with a young Christian wife I know and one of my best friends, Natalie. The video was supposed to be just one video, a Q&A. We ended up having a lot of conversation. To make those videos shorter and a little easier to digest, I split it into 2 videos. So, if you have not seen part 1 of our Young Christian Wife talk, pause this video right now and go watch part 1. I'll have it linked somewhere around the screen for you guys to check it out. If you have watched part 1, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for watching this one. Part 2, this video, is all about submitting to our husbands and what that looks like and our views on the controversy, as well as dating advice that we received that has affected our marriage. So, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you guys on the other side.
So the next question we got is best advice for dating that prepared you for marriage. What is it?
Yes, the best advice that I got while I was dating actually came from my husband. But he said, you can't let your connection grow greater than your commitment. So when he told me he liked me and wanted to take me on a date, and I had said yes to that, I was more under the impression that we were going to just go on a few dates and kind of pursue each other that way and then see if we liked each other still in that way and wanted to have a relationship. But my husband, at the time when we were dating, he was very clear, he knew he wanted to be in a relationship with me. He knew he was, wanting to seek out marriage with me, and I just wasn't so sure. I was sure enough of my interest in him to want to go on a few dates, but I wasn't sure enough if it was going to be, not that once you're dating, now you're married. It's not like that, but I just wasn't sure if I wanted that. But we definitely were growing in our connection quickly, and I was kind of dragging my feet a little bit to commit to a relationship. Hadn't really taken the time to process where we were at. But he kept asking me if I would be his girlfriend, and I just kept saying, I need more time, I need more time. I don't know for what, but something in me just wanted more time, I guess. Maybe selfishly wanted more time. And we went and got coffee one day, and he was like, okay, listen, our connection is growing way further than our commitment right now. I feel so connected to you, but we're not at that commitment level. And so he said, which I'm this is really bold of him. He's like, either we need to be boyfriend and girlfriend, or we need to completely stop, because the feelings I'm having for you, don't match the actual reality of our relationship. And I'm not, we can't be in limbo. And it was good. That advice really, I think, even as we then continued, now we're boyfriend and girlfriend, and as we were even approaching marriage and other things, just really reminding ourselves, is our connection right now greater than our commitment? Are we having married conversations when we're not married? Or even when it came to physical boundaries, making sure we're no, our connection cannot be greater than our commitment emotionally, spiritually, physically. We need to make sure we're staying in that lane.
Pre-dating. This is also my husband's advice.
Wow, we got some wise men.
There's some wise men. Okay.
We need a third.
So, something that Harrison says still is not to even pursue dating until you know, not necessarily you have to know right at that moment that you would ready to get married. Wow. That you would be ready to get married to that person, but don't start dating if you're not ready to get married in the near future when you start dating that someone, because like Courtney was saying, your connection's going to grow faster than you probably anticipate with that person, and you don't want to put yourself in a tough situation by really dragging it out. Looking back, if I had known beforehand, you could save yourself a lot of struggle and mental gymnastics, kind of to figure out what you want, I guess, to just know okay, I am ready to get married, instead of just kind of messing around and just having someone there really as a companion without the commitment. Secondly, we did this.
Oh, she got 2?
I got 3 actually. I'll make them quick.
I love it. No, I love it. I love it.
Pre-dating. Okay, you're ready to be married.
Yeah.
Not necessarily to that person at that moment, but you would be ready to be married.
Yes.
After you get to know. Now you're dating. And I'm not saying everybody has to do this, but something that we did that I really appreciated was that we didn't say I love you to one another until the day we got engaged. When we read the Bible, we're talking about protecting our hearts and guarding our heart, and not in a way to never commit to something, but just thinking about you're not married till you're married. And so when you say I love you to somebody, it might mean one thing to you, but it might be more serious to the person you're saying I love you to. You say I love you to somebody, and then later on you break up, and then you're questioning okay, did this person really love me? Did I really love this person? If I wasn't willing to continue to choose them, when things got hard or when certain things came up, you said you love them, and then now you bring that into your next relationship where you're going to be a little more insecure about saying I love you to somebody or hearing I love you and knowing if you can trust it or not. And so I think us choosing not to say I love you till we got engaged was like that level of commitment that's like, this is a connection piece that we're waiting for that specific level of commitment.
Like when you're married, love is so different than when you're not married. And how you experience it, how you show it, how you talk about it. You have to, and it's a choice. I think, you know, we see it even in the Bible, like love is a choice. Like you can choose to love Jesus or not. You can choose to love your friends or choose to love whomever, or you can choose to not. But the love you experience, the love, not that it's not real or there's not realness to it, that you experience before you're married is so vastly different than when you are married. And when you are married, that you are choosing every day to love your spouse despite the horrible things they may do or say, or the way they may smell, or how they're going to look that day. Like, whatever it is, like, you are choosing to love them that day.
That's actually the last advice that I got, which was from my dad, actually. I remember when Harris and I were talking about getting engaged, I called my dad just to talk to him kind of about it, which is
I
like...
love your dad. I love your dad. I'm excited
My dad's the best, but this is, I don't know, it's just a really sweet conversation where we were talking about what it's like to be married and, like, things he wished he and my mom got to do before they had kids and all that kind of stuff. But, because I was trying to figure out, like, how do you know when you're actually ready to marry that person? Because there's that piece I talked about before where, like, you're ready to be married in general, but then it's, like, that specific person. How do you know? And Courtney was saying, like, love is a choice, and that's exactly what my dad told me. He's like, you know you're ready to be married if you're ready to choose to love that person, because it is a decision you're going to make. It's not this feeling like, oh, I'm falling. Not that it can't be a feeling, too, but, like, you just, like, fall in love, and it's the time. You have that whatever
like, you
moment.
just know.
Yeah. You don't just know. You choose. You decide, like, okay, I love this person, and I'm going to choose them every day. I'm going to choose to make this commitment with them. That decision piece was really, I think, the thing that prepared me for that type of marriage love that Courtney was just talking about.
So it is really, like, you know, like, I am going to choose this person through thick and thin, and you kind of flex that and have experienced that with them, where there's times where maybe it was easier if you would have just broken up or walked away, but when you're seeing yourself choosing to go through it despite, because you find that person so worth it, and you see what the Lord is doing in your relationship so worth, and you find that worth it, like, you totally know, like, that's it. Love is a choice, and I'm choosing you.
This is our last question.
My last question is kind of a doozy.
Controversial.
It is.
What does submission look like in your marriage?
Yes, I don't know why I was like,
submission.
That's not what submission is like. I think the reason this question is so controversial is because our culture hears it as like, you're a woman and you're a wife, so you are less. Like, you are not important. Everything your husband says, you need to agree with, you need to do. You don't need to have any opinion. You just need to obey.
Yeah.
And that is not true. There's truth in those things, but that is, like, it's not that black and white and not that simple. When I think of submission, I think of spiritual leadership. He is our leader, and so I need to trust him. And I also need to give him space to make decisions too, because I so badly want to, I like to be in control, okay? I'm type A, I like to know everything that's happening, and I like to just have all my ducks in a row, and sometimes it is really just easier and more convenient for me to plan things or for me to get things organized, whatever it may be. But for me to really, like, give my husband great leadership, I need to give him things to make decisions on too. Even though it might be easier for me to just do it, I like to give them to him because it empowers him to make a decision. It also helps humble me and keep me, like, under the leadership of my husband too. Like, we're pretty, like, high capacity servant leaders at our church, and it's amazing and great, but I was feeling really burnt out for a while just because of other things happening externally outside of church, and it was really hard to keep serving because it just felt like there was so many things happening and I was just exhausted. And I had come to Joe many times and was like, I think we need to take a break. And I really wanted to do that. I was like, I need to take a break. I think we need to take a break together. But he disagreed. He thought that what we needed more in that season was to keep serving in church. And it kind of, like, caused a lot of conflict and felt like we weren't on the same page. I felt like what I was saying to him wasn't being heard. But I really, after praying about it for a while, realized, like, this was something I need to trust his leadership in, even though I may not like it, or it may not be what I desire, I need to trust like the position that God's put him in. I need to trust like his calling as my husband and as a leader. And wouldn't you know, like a couple months later, the conversation came up again, and that was when he decided. He was like, you know what, honey, like, I think now is the time the Lord is asking us to take a break. I don't think it was the right time then. Seeing his leadership in that and giving him the ability to make decisions and just trusting him, that's really what submission is. Like, I trust that he is submitting himself to the Lord, so I trust that I can submit myself to him because I know that he is being led by the Lord. Therefore, I am being led by the Lord. And it's not like if I'm like, I want to go here for dinner, and he's like, no, we're going here. It's not like, that's not what it looks like. Like, you can still have discussion and still like there definitely are. I totally get my way probably more than I should. It's just trusting that your husband is submitting to the Lord, therefore you can submit to him because you're just submitting to the Lord. But part of my like role of being like a wife and submitting myself to my husband is by supporting him in these things that he desires that are for our family. That is also a part of like submission, is supporting him in what he feels called to do and led to do, and just letting him, being the best cheerleader for him that I can be, because I know that by doing that, my desires will be met and he'll be the cheerleader for me.
In Ephesians 5, verse 21, starting, it's exactly what we're talking about, but it says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. I'm going to stop there. There's a lot through the rest of this that's really good. The wife is submitting to the husband, but also like the Bible talks about, which is one of the misconceptions I think, and why this is a controversial topic, is this kind of topic has been used poorly in the past and used by Christians sometimes to like have a one-up on their wife, or to make women like submit. And so I want to point out a few things in here that are really important.
Take us to church, girl.
We're going to church. In verse 24, it says, now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands. This is not every man in the whole face of the earth. This is specifically talking to wives submitting to their own husbands. So Courtney's not going to submit to my husband, and I'm not going to submit to Courtney's husband, but Courtney's going to submit to Joe, and I'm going to submit to Harrison. It's very specific in that context. In verse 25, it says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. So I think a lot of times why this is controversial too is it feels like, oh, like Courtney was saying earlier, like the woman is lesser, or the woman is the one who's submitting and the husband doesn't have to do anything. But the call that God gives the husbands is pretty significant. I mean, he's saying, love them as Christ loved the church, which Christ died on the cross for the church.
To give themselves up to their wives.
Yeah, which means, like, so what God's calling them to is if they need to, like, lay down your life. Your whole life is supposed to be given to making your wife holy, cleansing her by the washing with water. You know, basically bringing her through the word, that spiritual leadership that Courtney was talking about. Like, that's their role. They're responsible for us in that way as we're responsible for them and taking care of them and submitting to them. It is a mutual submission. We're both submitting to one another. And yes, there's a sense that the husband is the head and making, you know, he should have the last say in these decisions because he's meant to represent Jesus, but that is under the guise that he is submitting to the Lord first. So if your husband is not submitting to the Lord and is trying to lead you into doing something sinful or something that is dishonoring to God, that is not something that the Bible says you need to submit to your husband in, because it's to the Lord first, and your husband is supposed to be submitting to the Lord. But if he's leading you to do things that are sinful, those are not the things that you should be submitting. And so even if you have a Christian husband, if you really think there's something that he's made a decision on, maybe that you don't think is biblical or might be sinful, like, that's a really big discussion you need to have, because if it's really not biblical and it's not something the Lord is leading you to, like, that's not something, like, God wants us to submit to him first, and our husband is like a vessel. When I submit to my husband, I am submitting to God and trusting his leadership. So when I submit to my husband, I'm really asking myself, one, do I trust the Lord? And two, do I trust my husband to be seeking the Lord and to be making these decisions based off of his relationship with God and the wisdom that God has for our marriage?
Yeah, I think even as we were reading, and it was saying for, like, through the husband's love for his wife, like, he's keeping her, like, blameless in sight before the Lord. And that, like, even as earlier when we were talking about sin and how we, like, our sin is, like, now our husband's sin too, it's like that also plays a role in submission. Like, if my husband is not leading me well, like, it's not saying it's his fault if I'm sinning, but, like, if he's not leading me well, he's leading himself with the Lord unwell too.
For example, in Genesis, when Adam and Eve sinned for the first time, like, even though Eve was the one who ate the fruit and then gave it to Adam, God still talks to Adam, and Adam is the one who takes on the responsibility because God is like, Adam tries to blame it and being like, you gave me this woman.
Yeah.
And God's like, she's your responsibility. What God called Adam to was to care for his wife and to watch over her, and he didn't do that. Eve went and got tricked by the serpent, and so she sinned, and so Adam's responsibility over protecting her and keeping her safe from sin, he didn't do it. And it's Eve's responsibility too, but it's also Adam's responsibility when God confronts him.
Like, if I'm prideful, it's not Joe's fault that I'm prideful and putting that pride out wherever it is, like whether it's against him or other things. But there is that moment that he needs to have in his head as husband of, okay, I see this sin in my wife, which means that I need to make sure I'm helping her be led towards righteousness and, like, calling out, hey honey, like, this is a prideful thing in you, and I'm going to call this out on you because I love you so much that I'm willing to help walk with you to overcome that pride so that I am no longer prideful, which will help my husband also lead us better and lead us more into righteousness. I'm enabling him and supporting him to lead just as much as he is helping me to continuously be, like, beautiful before the Lord through submitting to him. But really it is spiritual leadership and trust, and so it's really just submit to the Lord, both of you. It is controversial because, I mean, as we've talked about, just people view it differently, but it is a delight to get to submit to the Lord.
I'm not gonna lie, I actually love it because it means I don't have the responsibility of making certain decisions, which is, like, really silly, and, like, people's personalities are totally different, and I think the Bible also talks about, like, in the beginning when Adam and Eve sinned, like, women are gonna fight against their husbands for control, and so seeing that as a reality is really interesting to me, but also, like, I actually secretly like being the wife instead of the man, because the man has more responsibility. Okay.
I like being the wife.
I'm a woman, that's great, but I just mean in the sense, like, I do by default get to let him make decisions and him have the responsibility, and I want to support him as much as possible in those things, but it is really nice, and the way that I'm designed by God is, like, to submit to God and to submit to my husband, and so having that, it's the same as in my relationship with God. Like, there are some things I'm so glad I'm not in control of. Often I want control of a lot of things, but when I really think about it, if I had control of this stuff, it would be terrible. So, like, God being in control of those things, and, like, the husband making the decision to be in control of certain things is really nice. Like, it's on God's shoulders instead of your own.
Yeah, it is such a blessing to get to submit and to get to do it for the Lord and unto the Lord, and it's glorifying to God too, because ultimately, like, we all submit to Jesus. He's on the throne, and it says that like, the government rests upon his shoulders, like, his enemies are his footstool, and so it's like there is submission with the Lord, and so it's beautiful that we get to submit to our husbands as they submit to the Lord. It's beautiful. So that's it, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. It's really fun to get to talk about these things and to bring another person on and to get to chat through. Wife said I probably have coffee breath right now, so. Anyways, on that note, we'll see you next time. Bye!